She was left by her husband with nothing, but could never have imagined that the elderly man she was caring for would change her life forever. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Lily Evans had always been the type of person to lend a helping hand. Her small, close-knit community knew her as the woman who could be counted on for anything, whether it was baking for a fundraiser, volunteering at the local shelter, or just being there to listen. But her husband, Derek, never quite shared her passion for helping others. He was a pragmatic man, one who believed in focusing on their own future first. And that difference between them had begun to strain their marriage in ways Lily hadn't anticipated. It all began on a cold autumn afternoon. Lily was driving back home from running errands when she noticed an elderly man stumbling on the sidewalk near the park. He seemed lost and confused, his clothes rumpled and his gaze distant. Something about the way he wandered aimlessly pulled at her heartstrings. She couldn't just leave him there. Pulling her car over, she approached the man cautiously. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, trying not to startle him. "Are you all right? Do you need some help?" The man looked up at her, his eyes clouded with confusion. He seemed to struggle to find his words, but when he finally spoke, his voice was weak. I don't know where I am," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I don't know how I got here." Lily's heart clenched at the sight. She had seen enough elderly people in distress during her time volunteering at the local shelter, and something about him seemed familiar. "Why don't you come with me?" she offered. "I'll take you somewhere warm and we can figure this out." After a brief hesitation, the old man nodded, allowing Lily to guide him to her car. She helped him settle in the passenger seat and drove him to her home, her mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Did he have family? And why was he wandering around alone like this? Derek was already home when Lily pulled into the driveway, unloading her unexpected guest. From the moment he saw the elderly man leaning on her arm, Derek's expression soured. "What now?" he asked, his tone laced with frustration. "Who is this?" "He needs help," Lily replied, ignoring the tension in Derek's voice. "He was wandering around the park, and he doesn't know where he is. I couldn't just leave him there." Derek's eyes narrowed. "So you bring him here?" "Lily, we don't even know who he is. For all we know, he could be some scam artist or—" "Derek, he's an old man," Lily interrupted, her voice firmer than she intended. "He needs someone right now. Just let me help him." Reluctantly, Derek waved a hand dismissively. "Fine, but this isn't our responsibility. He's probably someone else's problem." Lily ignored his words and helped the man, whom she learned was named Albert, into the house. She settled him into the guest room, offering him a cup of tea and warm blankets as he slowly began to relax. Over the next few hours, Lily tried to piece together Albert's story. It was clear that he was suffering from some sort of memory loss, but there were brief flashes of clarity in his words. He spoke of a distant home, but he couldn't remember exactly where it was. And he mentioned a family, though no names came to him. For days, Lily tried to track down anyone who might know Albert, but every effort came up short. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. In the meantime, Derek's frustration grew. He couldn't understand why Lily was investing so much time and energy into a stranger when they had their own lives to worry about. "You're too trusting," Derek argued one evening after dinner. "You can't keep bringing strays into our home, Lily. We have bills to pay, a future to think about. This man isn't your responsibility." Lily sighed, feeling the weight of Derek's words pressing down on her. He wasn't entirely wrong. They did have financial concerns, and it wasn't like they were living in luxury. But something about Albert's situation gnawed at her. It wasn't just her natural instinct to help. It was as if there was something more to his story that she couldn't quite grasp. Days turned into weeks, and still, no one came forward to claim Albert. During this time, Lily grew closer to him, learning bits and pieces about his past, though much of it remained a mystery. He had once been a businessman, but the details were foggy, and he often drifted into silence when she pressed for more. Derek, on the other hand, became more distant, his patience wearing thin. "I can't take this anymore," he finally snapped one evening after a particularly tense argument. "You're obsessed with this man. You've completely forgotten about us, about our future." Lily stood in silence, tears welling in her eyes. She had tried to balance everything: her compassion for Albert and her relationship with Derek, but it was clear she had failed, and now she was at risk of losing everything. "You have to make a choice," Derek continued, his voice hard. "It's either him or me." Lily's heart sank as she realized how much Derek had grown to resent her kindness, her willingness to help others. But the thought of abandoning Albert, of leaving him to fend for himself, was unthinkable. She couldn't do it. "I'm sorry, Derek," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I can't turn my back on him." The next morning Derek was gone. In the days that followed, Lily tried to push past the pain of Derek's departure. She threw herself into caring for Albert, who seemed to sense the change in her but never said a word about it. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, piece by piece. Her friends and neighbors rallied around her, offering support as best they could. Then, one cold winter morning, everything changed. Lily woke up to find Albert's bed empty. Panic surged through her as she searched the house, her heart pounding in her chest. But he was nowhere to be found. For hours, she scoured the neighborhood, calling his name, checking every street corner and park bench. But it was as if Albert had vanished into thin air. Days passed, and still there was no sign of him. Just as Lily began to accept the worst, that Albert had wandered off and met some tragic fate, a letter arrived at her door. It was addressed to her in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Trembling, she tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words in disbelief. The message was simple but profound. Albert had been a man of great means, and his disappearance wasn't an accident. He had left intentionally, knowing that his time was running out. But before he vanished from her life, he had made sure to leave her with something that would change her life forever. Lily stood frozen, clutching the letter in her trembling hands. The words on the page didn't seem real. Her thoughts raced as she reread the letter, desperately trying to make sense of it all. Albert had left, but why? And what did he mean by changing her life forever? The letter itself was brief, but the meaning behind it was profound. "Dear Lily, by the time you read this, I will have moved on to the next chapter of my life. You gave me something I had not felt in many years: compassion, care, and kindness. For that, I am eternally grateful. I have no family to pass this to, so I leave it to you, the one who showed me the warmth of humanity in my final days. Enclosed is the deed to my estate. It's yours, along with everything it holds. My time has come to an end, but your kindness will continue to live on in this gift. Take care of yourself, and never stop helping those in need. A deed." Lily's mind reeled as she examined the papers enclosed with the letter. It was real. There was an official deed to a property listed in her name. She hadn't even known Albert owned anything, let alone an estate. For weeks, he had seemed like a frail, lost man with no possessions to his name. And now, out of nowhere, she was holding documentation that could change her life. The address was unfamiliar, but as she looked it up, she realized it was in a remote countryside village a few hours away. It took every ounce of resolve she had not to crumble under the weight of it all. Derek's departure, Albert's disappearance, and now this sudden windfall. It was overwhelming. Yet there was something deep inside her, a flicker of hope, that urged her to follow this unexpected path. She decided to visit the property. Perhaps there, she would find answers to the many questions swirling in her mind. The drive to the estate was long and winding, through quiet roads and past fields of rolling green hills. As Lily approached the address, her nerves were on edge, not knowing what to expect. She imagined an old, decrepit house that had long since been forgotten, but what she saw when she finally arrived shocked her. The estate was massive. A sprawling mansion, surrounded by manicured gardens and tall, ancient trees, stood at the end of a cobblestone driveway. The house itself was old but well-maintained, with a grandeur that took her breath away. How had Albert, a man who had appeared so humble and worn down, come to possess something like this? Her heart pounded as she got out of the car and approached the front door. With the deed and the keys in hand, she unlocked it and stepped inside. The interior was just as grand as the outside. Elegant furnishings, high ceilings, and walls adorned with paintings that seemed to tell the story of a forgotten legacy. Dust covered the surfaces, suggesting that the place had been vacant for quite some time, but it still held an air of opulence. Lily wandered through the house in a daze, her mind struggling to process the reality of it all. This estate was hers now, a gift from a man she had helped without expecting anything in return. She couldn't understand why Albert had chosen her, why he hadn't mentioned his wealth, or why he had left so suddenly. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just taken a dramatic turn. The more she explored the house, the more questions she had. In the study, she found old photographs of Albert as a young man, standing with various figures. Some she recognized as prominent business leaders and politicians. There were also documents, business contracts, and letters, hinting at Albert's once powerful role in the financial world. It became clear that Albert had been a man of considerable influence and wealth. Yet, for some reason, he had chosen to spend his final days as a seemingly penniless, forgotten soul. Why? As Lily sifted through the papers in the study, she came across a name she didn't expect to see. Derek. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the page. It was a business contract dated several years ago, detailing a failed investment that Derek had been involved in. Albert had been the main investor, and the project had collapsed, resulting in significant financial loss. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Albert had known Derek all along. Lily's hands shook as she dug deeper, finding more documents that painted a grim picture. Derek had been part of a business deal that went sour, one that had left Albert nearly bankrupt. It seemed Derek had never told her about it, but he had known who Albert was from the beginning. Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. Derek's hostility toward Albert, his frustration with Lily's kindness, his sudden departure. All of it made sense now. Derek had recognized Albert from the moment Lily brought him home. And instead of coming clean, he had grown increasingly resentful, knowing that Lily's compassion was the very thing standing between him and the wealth he had hoped to regain. Lily's heart sank as the truth hit her full force. Derek hadn't left her because she was too kind or too generous. He had left because he knew that Albert's presence would expose his lies. Derek had been waiting for Albert to pass, hoping that his death would bring him a financial windfall. But Albert had seen through Derek's greed and chosen to leave his estate to Lily instead. Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she stared at the contract, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. Derek had known all along, and he had left her, thinking he could outsmart Albert. But Albert had outplayed him in the end, leaving everything to the one person who had shown him genuine kindness. The weight of it all settled heavily on Lily's shoulders. She had lost her husband, but in the process, she had gained something far more valuable, an understanding of who she truly was. Albert's gift was more than just a house or an estate. It was a silent blessing, a testament to the power of compassion and the rewards that came from helping others without expecting anything in return. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lily spent time organizing the estate, sorting through Albert's belongings, and making arrangements to honor his memory. She also sought legal advice to ensure the deed and the inheritance were handled properly. But as she did, a quiet determination began to grow within her. She realized that this estate wasn't just a gift for her, it was a responsibility. Albert had left her with the means to change her life, but more importantly, to continue the work she had always done, helping others. And that was exactly what she intended to do. Lily decided to convert part of the estate into a community shelter and outreach center. The large house would become a place where people in need could find help, just as Albert had found help when he needed it most. It was her way of giving back, of honoring the silent blessing Albert had bestowed upon her. Lily's life had shifted dramatically in the weeks that followed her discovery of the truth. The estate, now in her name, had been transformed into a beacon of hope for those in need. She poured her energy into renovating the mansion, converting unused rooms into shelter spaces and creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere for families in distress. The outreach program she built became a cornerstone of the community, offering services to the homeless, job seekers, and those down on their luck. Despite the whirlwind of activity surrounding her, a quiet sadness still lingered. She hadn't heard from Derek since he walked out of their home, and although she now understood his motives, it didn't ease the pain of betrayal. Every so often, her mind wandered back to their final argument, wondering how things might have been different if he had been honest with her from the start. But she quickly reminded herself that Derek's actions had shaped her future in ways she hadn't anticipated. The house, once filled with the mystery of Albert's past, had become a place where people came to build new futures. And as the months passed, the community grew to rely on Lily's leadership and compassion. Albert's estate had given her the means to help others on a grander scale, but it was her innate kindness that truly transformed lives. One late afternoon, while overseeing renovations to the estate's garden, Lily was approached by a familiar face. It was Mr. Jacobs, the lawyer who had handled Albert's estate. He had been instrumental in helping Lily secure the property, but she hadn't seen him since those early days after Albert's disappearance. "Mr. Jacobs," Lily said with a smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's good to see you again. What brings you here?" He returned the smile but seemed more serious than usual. "I'm afraid I have some more paperwork for you to look over, regarding Albert's estate." Lily frowned slightly, puzzled. "More paperwork? I thought everything had been settled." Mr. Jacobs hesitated, then handed her a sealed envelope. "This came to my office just yesterday. It's a final letter from Albert." Her heart skipped a beat as she took the envelope from him. A final letter. What else could there possibly be to say? She thanked Mr. Jacobs and excused herself, retreating into the quiet of the mansion's study to read the letter in private. The envelope was weathered, and the handwriting familiar. Albert's steady, neat script filled the page as she unfolded the letter. This time, the message was more cryptic, as if Albert had left her with one last puzzle to solve. "Dear Lily, if you are reading this, then you've come far. You've taken the gift I left and turned it into something beautiful, just as I knew you would. But there's more to my story, more than I revealed to you in our time together. You see, I've left one final treasure behind, one that will bring your journey to its rightful end. There is a hidden room in the estate, a place I never spoke of. It's not on any blueprint, nor will you find any obvious signs of its existence. But if you look closely, you'll find the key to unlock its secrets. Trust yourself as you've always done and follow the clues. This room holds the last piece of the puzzle, something that will make everything clear. Thank you for everything, Lily. You've given me peace in my final days. Now I hope I can give you the same." Lily's hands trembled as she read the letter. A hidden room. A final treasure. Her mind raced as she thought back to the time she had spent exploring the estate. She had uncovered so much of Albert's past already. What more could there be? But something about the letter pulled at her, urging her to follow Albert's final wish. She had come too far to turn back now. For the next several days, Lily combed through the mansion, searching for any clue that might lead her to the hidden room Albert had mentioned. She scoured the walls, the floorboards, the attic, and the basement, but nothing seemed out of place. Frustration gnawed at her, but she refused to give up. Then, one evening, as she was dusting the grand fireplace in the study, she noticed something strange. The ornate carving along the mantel seemed different. There was a small, barely noticeable indentation that she hadn't seen before. Her heart raced as she pressed her fingers against it. With a soft click, part of the wall shifted, revealing a hidden panel. Behind it was a narrow staircase, leading down into the depths of the estate. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she realized she had found it. The hidden room. She descended the stairs, her pulse quickening with each step. The air grew cooler as she reached the bottom, where a heavy wooden door stood before her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. Inside, the room was unlike anything she had ever seen in the mansion. It was small, almost cave-like, with stone walls and a single desk in the center. On the desk was a box, and next to it, a letter. Lily's hands shook as she opened the letter. Albert's familiar handwriting once again greeting her. "Dear Lily, by now you've found the last piece of the puzzle. This room holds the truth of who I am and who you are. The box on the desk contains my personal papers, my will, and the final revelation I never had the chance to share with you in person. Inside, you will learn the truth of our connection, one that even I didn't fully understand until it was too late. You see, Lily, you are not just a kind stranger who helped me in my time of need. You are the granddaughter I never knew I had. Your mother, my daughter, was lost to me many years ago, and I've spent my life searching for her. It was only in my final days that I discovered she had passed, but that you, her child, were still living. When I met you, I didn't realize the connection at first, but as the days went on, I began to suspect. My instincts told me to trust you, to leave everything in your hands. And now, I know for certain you are my family, my only family. This estate, this fortune was always meant for you. Take it, and continue the legacy of kindness and generosity that you have already begun. I leave it all to you, my dear granddaughter. You are my final blessing." Tears streamed down Lily's face as the words sank in. She was Albert's granddaughter. The old man she had helped, the man who had changed her life, had been her family all along. She opened the box on the desk and found the papers confirming everything. Her mother's birth certificate, documents tracing her family's lineage, and Albert's will, which named her as his sole heir. It all made sense now. The connection she had felt with Albert, the strange pull to help him despite Derek's objections, and Albert's unwavering trust in her. She wasn't just a stranger who had stumbled into his life. She was his flesh and blood. Lily stood in the hidden room for what felt like hours, overwhelmed by the revelation. Her life had been turned upside down, but in the most extraordinary way. The fortune Albert had left her wasn't just material wealth. It was a legacy, one that she was now responsible for carrying on. And as she walked back up the stairs, back into the light of the mansion, Lily knew that her life had come full circle. She had lost a husband but found a family. She had gained a fortune, but more importantly, she had gained a purpose. Albert's final blessing had been more than just money or property. It had been the gift of knowing where she came from and the chance to continue a legacy of compassion and kindness. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.